I never thought my own family could bury me alive. But that's exactly what my daughter-in-law, Claire, did. Not with a shovel and dirt, but with a forged death certificate. A lie so cold it could freeze your soul. My name is Evelyn Harper, and at 68, I've seen my share of betrayals, but none cut as deep as this. I raised my son, Daniel, to value loyalty, to cherish the blood that binds us. I gave him everything: a home, a legacy, my unwavering love. But Claire, she saw me as an obstacle, a relic to be erased so she could claim what wasn't hers. This is the story of how I clawed my way back from her lie, how I walked into that courtroom and made her beg for mercy. It started 2 years ago, when Daniel brought Claire home. She was all charm, with her polished smile and honeyed words. But I saw the glint in her eyes sharp, like a predator sizing up prey. I tried to warn Daniel, but love blinds even the wisest. They married within months, and soon, Claire's true colors bled through. She'd rearrange my furniture, dismiss my advice, and whisper to Daniel about modernizing our family's estate. The Harper house, built by my great-grandfather, wasn't just brick and mortar. It was our history, our heart. I'd promised my late husband, George, I'd protect it. But Claire wanted it for herself. I wasn't naive. I knew she resented me living with them, but I never imagined she'd go so far. The first sign came when my bank accounts froze. Clerical error, Claire said, her voice too smooth, as she promised to sort it out. Then my mail stopped arriving, and my phone calls went unanswered. Daniel, caught in her spell, brushed off my concerns. "You're overthinking, Mom," he'd say, his eyes avoiding mine. I felt like a ghost in my own home, fading with each passing day. Then came the day I died. I'd been feeling ill, nothing serious, just fatigue and dizziness. Claire insisted on taking me to a doctor she knew. "Rest, Evelyn," she said, handing me a glass of water and a pill. I trusted her. That was my mistake. I woke up in a strange room. Not a hospital, but a sterile, windowless place that smelled of antiseptic and despair. My phone was gone. My wallet too. A man in a white coat told me I'd been in a coma, that I'd been out for months. I demanded answers, but he only muttered about family instructions before leaving me alone. Days blurred into weeks. I was trapped, fed just enough to keep me alive. My questions met with silence. I thought of Daniel, wondering if he knew, if he'd abandoned me. The pain of that thought was worse than any hunger. But I'm a Harper, and Harpers don't break. I started listening, watching, piecing together fragments. The nurse who brought my meals let slip that Claire had paid for my care. That's when I knew she'd orchestrated this. Faked my death to seize control of the estate. I don't know how long I was there, maybe 6 months. Time loses meaning when you're caged. But one night, the nurse left the door unlocked. I don't know if it was carelessness or pity, but I didn't hesitate. I slipped out, my legs weak, but my heart pounding with purpose. The facility was in a rundown part of town, far from our estate. I had no money, no ID, but I had my will. I walked until dawn, hiding in alleys, until I found a payphone and called the one person I could trust, Margaret, my oldest friend and a retired lawyer. Margaret didn't ask questions. She picked me up, her face pale as she saw my gaunt frame. "Evelyn, you're alive," she whispered, tears in her eyes. I told her everything, the words spilling out like poison. She took me to her home, gave me clothes, food, and a plan. "We'll take her down," Margaret said, her voice steel. "But we need proof." I nodded, my resolve hardening. Claire thought she'd buried me, but I was about to rise. We started digging. Margaret's contacts in the legal world uncovered the death certificate, stamped with my name, claiming I'd died of heart failure. Claire had used it to transfer the estate to her name, convincing Daniel I was gone. My son, my boy, believed her. That hurt more than anything. But I couldn't dwell on it, not yet. We found the doctor who'd signed the certificate, a shady figure with a history of bending rules for cash. Margaret leaned on him, and he cracked, admitting Claire paid him to fake it. The facility was harder to trace, but we found Ida Private Care Home with no license, a front for Claire's scheme. The nurse, guilt-ridden, gave us records showing Claire's payments. Every piece of evidence was a brick in the wall I'd build to crush her. But I didn't just want her exposed. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal, to look into my eyes and know she'd failed. As we built our case, I thought of Daniel. I wanted to run to him, to tell him I was alive. But Margaret stopped me. He's under her thumb, she said. We need to do this right. So I waited, my heart breaking every day I stayed hidden. I imagined Claire in my home, sitting in my chair, wearing my family's legacy like a stolen crown. The anger kept me going. But so did something else, the hope of saving my son, of redeeming us all. We filed a motion to contest the estate transfer, citing fraud. The court date was set, and I prepared to face Claire. I wasn't just fighting for my name or my home. I was fighting for justice, for the truth to burn through her lies. The day approached, and I felt alive again, not as a ghost, but as Evelyn Harper, a mother, a survivor, ready to make her beg. The morning of the court hearing dawned gray and heavy, like the weight of the truth I carried. I stood in Margaret's guest room, staring at my reflection in a borrowed dress, simple navy, the kind of thing I'd worn to countless family gatherings. My face was thinner, my eyes sharper, but I was still me, still Evelyn. Margaret drove us to the courthouse, her hands steady on the wheel, while mine trembled in my lap. I wasn't afraid of Claire. I was afraid of seeing Daniel, of what his eyes might tell me. Did he mourn me? Did he know? The courthouse loomed ahead, its stone facade cold and unyielding. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and tension. Margaret led me to a side room, where we'd wait until the hearing began. Stay strong, she whispered, squeezing my hand. I nodded, clutching the folder of evidence we'd gathered: bank records, the forged death certificate, the nurse's signed statement. It was enough to bury Claire, but I wanted more than her ruin. I wanted her to see me, to feel the shame of her lies. The bailiff called the case, and we slipped into the courtroom. I stayed at the back, hidden in the shadows of the gallery, my scarf pulled high. Claire sat at the defendant's table, her posture perfect, her blonde hair sleek. She wore a tailored suit, expensive, the kind that screamed control. Daniel was beside her, his face drawn, his eyes fixed on the floor. My heart ached at the sight of him, so like his father, but lost, caught in her web. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair, began the proceedings, her voice cutting through the room. Margaret stood, presenting our motion to reverse the estate transfer. She laid out the case with precision: the forged certificate, the doctor's confession, the illegal facility. Claire's lawyer, a slick man with a fake smile, countered with denials, claiming I'd been ill, that my death was a tragic misunderstanding. Claire played her part, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, but I saw the flicker of her lips, the hint of a smirk. She thought she'd won. Then Margaret called her witness. Evelyn Harper, she said, her voice clear. The room froze. Claire's head snapped up, her face paling as I stood and walked to the stand. Gasps rippled through the courtroom, and Daniel's eyes widened, his mouth opening in disbelief. "Mom," he whispered, the word breaking me. I wanted to run to him, but I held my ground. My gaze locked on Claire. The judge demanded order, her gavel sharp. I took the oath, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Margaret led me through my testimony, every word a dagger. I told them how Claire drugged me, locked me away, faked my death. I described the facility, the loneliness, the betrayal. The evidence backed me up, each document a nail in Claire's coffin. Her lawyer objected, floundering, but the truth was undeniable. Claire's facade cracked. She stood, her voice shrill, claiming I was an imposter, a fraud. But the judge wasn't swayed. "Sit down, Mrs. Harper," she snapped. I saw the fear in Claire's eyes, the realization that her lies were unraveling. Daniel stared at her, his face a mix of horror and dawning truth. I wanted to reach for him, to tell him I forgave him. But this wasn't the moment. Margaret pressed harder, presenting the nurse's statement, the doctor's confession. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, the weight of Claire's deceit suffocating the air. I watched her squirm, her hands twisting in her lap. She'd thought me weak, a relic to be discarded. But here I was, alive, unyielding. The judge called a recess, and I stepped down, my legs shaking but my heart steady. In the hallway, Daniel approached, his eyes red. "Mom, I didn't know," he said, his voice breaking. I wanted to hold him, to erase the pain, but I couldn't, not yet. "I believe you," I said softly, "but you need to see her for what she is." He nodded, tears falling, and I saw my boy again, the one I'd raised to know right from wrong. Back in the courtroom, Claire took the stand. She spun a story of confusion, of love for Daniel, of trying to protect the family. But her lies crumbled under Margaret's cross-examination. The nurse's testimony, read aloud, detailed Claire's payments, her instructions to keep me sedated. The doctor, sweating, admitted his role. Claire's eyes darted to the exit, but there was no escape. The judge's voice was ice as she addressed Claire. "You have committed a grave injustice, Mrs. Harper. The court will consider criminal charges." Claire's composure shattered. She turned to me, her voice a desperate hiss. "Evelyn, please." I didn't mean, I cut her off, my voice low but firm. "You meant every word, every act. You buried me alive. Claire, now you'll face the consequences." Daniel stood, his chair scraping the floor. "I'm done," he said, his voice shaking but resolute. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Mom, I'm so sorry." I nodded, my throat tight. The courtroom felt smaller, the walls closing in on Claire as the judge adjourned for deliberation. I knew we'd won, but the victory tasted bitter. My family was broken, and I wasn't sure we could mend it. Margaret took my arm as we left, her strength anchoring me. "You did it," she said. I shook my head. Not yet. Justice was coming, but redemption mine. Daniel's. Even Claire's would take longer. I glanced back at Claire, now alone, her head bowed. She'd beg for mercy soon, but mercy wasn't mine to give. Not yet. The courtroom's echo lingered in my mind as we stepped into the crisp afternoon air. Margaret drove me back to her house, the silence between us heavy with what had just happened. I'd faced Claire, exposed her lies, but the victory felt hollow. Daniel's broken voice, his "I'm sorry," played on repeat in my head. My son, my only child, had been part of her world. Her lies, even if unknowingly. I wanted to forgive him, to pull him close and rebuild what we'd lost. But the wound was too fresh, the betrayal too raw. At Margaret's, I sat by the window, staring at the bare trees swaying in the wind. She brought me tea, her eyes searching mine. "You're not done, are you?" she asked. I shook my head. Not until she's held accountable. Not until Daniel understands. Margaret nodded, her lawyer's mind already turning. The judge will rule soon. With the evidence. Claire's looking at fraud. Maybe kidnapping. But Evelyn, what about you? What do you need? I didn't have an answer. For months, I'd survived on anger, on the need to expose Claire. Now, with her lies laid bare, I felt unmoored. The Harper estate, my home, was still legally tangled in her name. Daniel was adrift, torn between guilt and love for the woman who deceived him. And me. I was alive, but I wasn't whole. Not yet. The next week was a blur of meetings with Margaret's legal team. We prepared for the judge's ruling, gathering more evidence to ensure Claire couldn't slip away. The nurse from the facility agreed to testify in person, her guilt pushing her to help. The doctor, facing his own charges, offered more details about Claire's payments, her meticulous plan to erase me. Every revelation was a twist of the knife, but it also fueled me. Claire had underestimated me, and that was her downfall. Daniel called daily, his voice hesitant, pleading. "Mom, can we talk? I need to see you." I wanted to, but Margaret advised caution. "He's still married to her," she said. "Until the court rules. He's a risk." It hurt to keep him at arm's length, but I trusted Margaret. She'd seen me through the darkest days. She knew what was at stake. The night before the ruling, I couldn't sleep. I sat at Margaret's kitchen table, flipping through old photos of Daniel's first bike, his graduation, his wedding to Claire. In every picture, he was smiling. But now I saw the shadows in his eyes, the weight of her influence. I wondered when he'd stopped being mine, when he'd let her pull him away. The pain was sharp, but beneath it was love, stubborn and unyielding. He was my son. I'd fight for him, even if he didn't know it. The courtroom was packed the next day. Word of my resurrection had spread, drawing reporters and curious locals. Claire sat alone, her lawyer's confidence gone. Daniel was there, in the front row, his face pale. I avoided his gaze, focusing on the judge as she entered. Her expression was unreadable, but her voice was firm as she began. "This court has reviewed the evidence of fraud, forgery, and unlawful detention committed by Claire Harper against Evelyn Harper." She detailed the findings: the forged certificate, the illegal facility, the financial trail. Claire's hands gripped the table, her knuckles white. The judge's words were a hammer, each one striking her down. "The transfer of the Harper estate is hereby reversed. All assets will be restored to Evelyn Harper." A murmur ran through the crowd, but I stayed still, my heart pounding. Then came the blow I'd waited for. "Mrs. Claire Harper, you are ordered to face criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and kidnapping. Bail is set at $500. 000. Claire's gasp was audible, her face crumpling. She turned to Daniel, but he looked away, his jaw tight. The judge continued, addressing me. "Mrs. Evelyn Harper, the court acknowledges the grave injustice done to you. You are free to reclaim your life." Free. The word felt foreign, like a language I'd forgotten. As the gavel fell, The room erupted in whispers. Claire was led away, her eyes darting to me, pleading. I met her gaze, unflinching. She'd wanted me gone. But I was here, alive, victorious. Yet the triumph was bittersweet. Daniel stood, his shoulders slumped, and walked toward me. Mom, he started, but I raised a hand. Not now, I said, my voice softer than I meant. We'll talk soon. Outside, the air was cold, but I felt a spark of warmth. Margaret hugged me, her smile fierce. You did it, Evelyn. I nodded, but my eyes were on Daniel, lingering by the courthouse steps. He looked lost, a boy again, needing his mother. I wanted to go to him, but the weight of Claire's betrayal still hung between us. Justice was mine, but redemption is mine. Ours would take time. Back at Margaret's, we celebrated quietly. She poured wine, and we toasted to truth. But my mind was on the estate, on the home I'd reclaim. I imagined walking through its halls, touching the walls that held my family's history. Claire had tried to steal it, but she'd failed. Still, the house felt empty without Daniel. I needed him back, not just as my son, but as the man I'd raised to know better. The next day, I visited the estate. The gates creaked as I pushed them open, the air thick with memories. The roses I'd planted with George still bloomed, defiant like me. Inside, Claire's touch was everywhere. New curtains, modern furniture, but it was still my home. I sat in my old chair, the one she'd mocked, and let the silence settle. This was my victory, but it wasn't enough. I needed my family whole again. Daniel called that night. Mom, I'm leaving her, he said, his voice raw. I didn't see it, and I'll never forgive myself. I closed my eyes, tears falling. Come home, I said. We'll figure it out. He paused, then whispered, I love you. Those words were a start, a crack in the wall between us. Claire's punishment was coming, but my fight now was for Daniel, for us, for redemption. The estate felt like a stranger's house at first, despite its familiar bones. I wandered its halls, touching the banister George had carved, the fireplace where Daniel used to read. Claire's changes were superficial: new paint, sleek lamps, but they grated, like her presence still lingered. I started reclaiming it, one room at a time. The modern furniture went to storage. My old oak table came back. It was more than decor. It was erasing her mark, restoring my life. But the house echoed with absence. Daniel wasn't here, and that hurt more than Claire's betrayal. He came the next day, his car pulling up the gravel drive. I watched from the porch, my heart caught between hope and fear. He stepped out, his face older than his 35 years, his eyes carrying a guilt I recognized. I'd seen it in the mirror after fights with George, after moments I wished I could undo. Mom, he said, stopping at the steps. I didn't wait for more. I hugged him, fierce and tight, like when he was a boy. He clung to me, shaking, and I knew we'd start healing. We sat in the kitchen, the heart of the house, over coffee gone cold. He told me everything: how Claire convinced him I was sick, how she handled the funeral alone, how he believed her because he trusted her love. I should have questioned it, he said, his voice cracking. I should have known you'd never leave me. I took his hand, my own trembling. You were hers, Daniel. She twisted you. But you're here now. He nodded, tears falling. And I saw my son again, not the man who'd let me go. The days that followed were fragile. Daniel moved back in, sleeping in his old room. We didn't talk about Claire much. It was too raw. Instead, we worked on the house, painting walls, tending the garden. It was therapy, a way to rebuild what we'd lost. But the court case loomed, a shadow over our fragile peace. Claire's criminal trial was set, and I'd have to face her again. This time, it wasn't just about the estate. It was about justice, about making her pay for the months she stole from me. Margaret kept me updated. Claire's lawyer was pushing for a plea deal, claiming she acted out of desperation. Not malice. Desperation. I scoffed when Margaret told me. She planned every step. Margaret agreed, her eyes sharp. We'll make sure the judge sees that. We prepared my testimony, going over every detail of my captivity. It was painful, reliving those months. But I owed it to myself, to Daniel, to see this through. The trial began on a rainy morning, the courtroom packed with reporters. Claire looked smaller, her polish gone, her eyes hollow. She'd posted bail, but freedom hadn't softened her. It had exposed her. Daniel sat beside me, his hand brushing mine. A silent promise. The prosecutor laid out the case: fraud, forgery, kidnapping. Each charge was a weight, pinning Claire down. Her lawyer argued she was protecting the family, that I was unstable. I gripped Daniel's hand, my anger flaring. When I took the stand, the room hushed. I told my story again, my voice steady but raw. I described the facility, the drugs, the isolation. I looked at Claire, her eyes avoiding mine, and felt a surge of power. She couldn't hide now. The prosecutor showed the evidence: bank transfers, the nurse's testimony, the doctor's confession. Claire's lawyer tried to spin it, but the truth was too heavy. Daniel testified next, his voice shaking but clear. He admitted his blindness, his failure to see Claire's lies. I thought I'd lost my mother, he said, looking at me. But she was fighting to come back to me. The jury watched, their faces softening. I saw Claire flinch, her mask slipping. She knew she'd lost him, lost everything. The trial stretched over days, each one peeling back Claire's lies. The nurse testified, her voice trembling, describing Claire's cold instructions to keep me sedated. The doctor, under oath, detailed her payments, her threats. Claire took the stand last, her voice thin, claiming she acted out of love for Daniel, to secure his future. But her words rang hollow, and the jury's eyes were hard. During a recess, Daniel and I stood outside, the rain soaking our coats. I loved her, he said, his voice low. How did I miss this? I touched his arm. She fooled us all. But you're free now. He nodded, but I saw the guilt lingering. I wanted to erase it, to tell him he was enough. But words weren't enough yet. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the courtroom was silent. Guilty, the foreman said, on all counts. Claire's sob broke the quiet, her head bowing. The judge sentenced her to 7 years, her face crumpling as she was led away. I felt no joy, only relief. Justice was done, but the scars remained. Outside, Daniel hugged me, his breath ragged. Can we go home? He asked. I nodded, my throat tight. The estate was waiting, our history intact. But as we drove back, I knew this wasn't the end. Claire's punishment was a start, but our redemption, Daniel's, mine would come from rebuilding, from choosing love over pain. I glanced at him, his profile sharp against the rain-streaked window, and felt hope. We'd get there, together. Home felt different with Daniel back. The estate was ours again, legally and spiritually, but it carried ghost Claire's schemes, my months of captivity, Daniel's guilt. We moved through the days carefully, like dancers learning new steps. Mornings were spent in the garden, pulling weeds, planting new roses. Afternoons, we'd sit in the library, sorting through old books, rediscovering stories we'd shared when he was young. It was healing, but slow, like mending a broken bone. Daniel was quieter now, his laughter rare. I saw him wrestling with what he'd done or hadn't done. He'd visit the attic, where we kept family photos, and I'd find him staring at pictures of his wedding, of Claire's smile. I should have seen it, he'd say, and I'd shake my head. You loved her. That's not a crime. But I knew he didn't believe me. Not yet. Guilt is a heavy thing, and he carried it like a stone. I wasn't untouched by it either. I'd lie awake, wondering if I'd failed him as a mother, if I'd been too soft, too trusting. George would have seen through Claire, I thought, but I'd let her into our home. The anger I'd felt in court had faded, replaced by a need to understand why she'd done it, how she'd justified it. I'd never get answers. Not really. But the question gnawed at me. Margaret came by often, her presence a comfort. She'd bring case files, updates on Claire's appeals, none successful. She's where she belongs, Margaret said one evening, sipping tea. I nodded, but my mind was on Daniel. He needs time, she added, reading me. But he's got you. That's enough. I hope she was right. I wanted to be enough, to pull him back from the edge of his shame. One afternoon, Daniel found a letter in the attic, tucked in an old book. It was from George, written before he died. To me. Evelyn, you're the heart of this family. It read, keep Daniel close, no matter what. I cried reading it. And Daniel did too, his hand on mine. Dad would have hated her, he said, and I nodded. But he'd be proud of you now. That night, we burned Claire's old curtains in the backyard, a small act of defiance, of reclaiming our space. The town buzzed with gossip about the trial. Neighbors dropped by, some with casseroles, others with questions. I kept them at a distance, protecting our fragile peace. But one visitor surprised me, the nurse from the facility. Sarah. She stood at my door, nervous, her eyes downcast. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't know how far she'd go. I invited her in, not out of forgiveness, but curiosity. She told me Claire had promised her money for her sick daughter's treatment, a lie to secure her silence. I should have stopped it, Sarah said. I didn't absolve her, but I understood. Desperation makes monsters of us all. Daniel listened, his face hard. She used everyone, he said after Sarah left. I nodded, but added, she's paying for it. Let's not let her take more from us. He looked at me, his eyes searching, and I saw a flicker of the boy he'd been. I'm trying, Mom, he said. I hugged him, feeling his heartbeat against mine, and knew we were getting there. The estate began to feel like home again. We hosted a small dinner for Margaret and a few friends, the first in years. Laughter filled the dining room, and I saw Daniel smile, a real smile, for the first time since the trial. But the past wasn't gone. Claire's name came up in whispers, in letters from her lawyer begging for leniency. I ignored them, but Daniel read one, his face darkening. She wants to see me, he said. I froze, my heart racing. Do you want to? I asked. He shook his head. No. I'm done. That night, I dreamed of the facility, of Claire's face as she handed me that pill. I woke sweating, my hands clenched. Daniel was in the kitchen, making coffee, and I joined him, the silence comforting. I'm thinking of selling my apartment, he said suddenly. I want to stay here. With you. My eyes stung, but I smiled. This is your home, I said. He nodded, and we sat. The dawn breaking outside. A new day for us both. The legal battles weren't over. Claire's appeals dragged on, and the estate's finances were a mess from her meddling. But with Margaret's help, we untangled it, piece by piece. I started a journal, writing to George, to Daniel, to myself, pouring out the pain and hope. It helped, grounding me. Daniel read it once, with my permission, and cried. I'll make it up to you, he promised. I didn't need promises. I needed him, and he was here. As winter settled in, the house felt warmer, not just from the fire, but from us. We were rebuilding, not just the estate, but our bond. Claire's shadow lingered, but it was fading. I looked at Daniel, laughing over a board game, and felt redemption not just for me, but for him. We'd been broken, but we were mending. Together, one day at a time. Winter wrapped the estate in quiet, the snow softening its edges, making it feel like a sanctuary. Daniel and I fell into a rhythm, our days filled with small acts of rebuilding, fixing creaky doors, sorting through old letters, cooking meals together. He was trying. I could see it, but guilt still clung to him like frost. I'd catch him staring out windows, lost in thought, and I knew he was replaying his years with Claire, searching for the moment he'd gone wrong. I wanted to tell him there was no single moment. That betrayal creeps in slowly, but I let him wrestle with it. Some battles you fight alone. The legal fallout continued. Claire's appeals were denied, her sentence firm. Margaret brought news that she'd been transferred to a state prison, her polished facade useless behind bars. I felt no satisfaction, only a dull relief. Justice was served, but it didn't erase the months I'd lost, the trust she'd shattered. Daniel took it harder. She's gone, but I still see her, he admitted one night, his voice low. I nodded, understanding. She's a ghost now. Don't let her haunt you. We started therapy, both together and separately. The counselor, a kind woman named Dr. Ellis, helped us navigate the wreckage. Daniel spoke of his shame, how he'd ignored my warnings about Claire. I spoke of my fear, of waking in that facility, of thinking he'd abandoned me. We cried, argued, laughed, and slowly, the walls between us thinned. Dr. Ellis called it rebuilding trust. But to me, it was love, stubborn and scarred, pulling us back together. One morning, Daniel found an old box in the basement, filled with George's things, his tools, his journals, a watch he'd worn daily. We sat on the floor, dust on our hands, reading his words. George had written about Daniel, about his pride in our son's kindness, his strength. He's got your heart, Evelyn. One entry read. Daniel's eyes watered, and he hugged me, the watch clutched in his hand. I want to be that man again, he said. I smiled, my throat tight. You already are. The community began to embrace us again. Neighbors, once wary of the scandal, invited us to dinners, to church. I saw their pity, their curiosity, but also their warmth. Daniel, shy at first, started opening up, helping a neighbor fix a fence, joining a book club. I watched him bloom, my boy finding his place. But Claire's shadow lingered in small ways, a letter from her lawyer, a reporter asking for a statement. I ignored them, but Daniel kept the letter, unopened, in his room. I didn't push. He'd face it when he was ready. Spring came, and with it, a decision. The estate was ours, but its upkeep was a burden. Daniel suggested selling part of the land, using the money to start a foundation in George's name, to help families torn apart by deceit. I loved the idea, seeing his father's spirit in him. We met with Margaret, who drafted the plans. "This is redemption," she said, smiling. I nodded, feeling it to a purpose beyond revenge, beyond pain. But Claire wasn't done. A letter arrived, not from her lawyer, but from her, written in her sharp, elegant script. She begged for forgiveness, claiming she'd changed, that prison had broken her. "I love Daniel," she wrote. "I was wrong. Evelyn, please." I read it, my hand steady, and felt nothing. Her words were empty. A performance. Daniel read it too, his face unreadable. "Burn it," he said, and we did, watching the paper curl in the fireplace. It was a small act, but it felt final. We held a ceremony for the foundation's launch, inviting the town. Daniel spoke, his voice strong, about healing, about family. I stood beside him, proud, my heart full. The roses bloomed around us, a reminder of what we'd kept, what we'd rebuilt. After, we walked the estate, just the two of us. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said again, but I stopped him. "You're here. That's enough." He smiled, and I saw George in him, the man he was becoming. The days grew warmer, the house brighter. We painted the kitchen, hung new photos once without Claire. Daniel started dating again, a quiet woman from the book club, and I saw him laugh, really laugh, for the first time in months. I wrote in my journal, telling George we were okay, that our son was finding his way. The pain wasn't gone, but it was softer, like a bruise fading. One evening, Margaret called with news. Claire had dropped her final appeal. "She's out of moves," she said. I thanked her, feeling a weight lift. The estate was ours. The truth was out, and Claire was a memory. Daniel and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset. "We made it," he said, his hand on mine. I nodded, tears in my eyes. We had justice. We had each other. And we had time. Redemption wasn't a moment. It was thesis. Together. Moving forward. Summer brought light to the estate. The kind that seeps into your bones and makes you believe in second chances. Daniel and I were finding our stride. Our days filled with purpose. The George Harper Foundation was taking shape, with grants going to families rebuilding after betrayal. It was Daniel's idea, but I saw my husband in If's generosity, his belief in doing right. Watching Daniel meet with applicants, his empathy shining, I felt a pride so deep it hurt. He was healing, and so was I. But healing isn't linear. Some nights, I'd wake from dreams of the facility, my heart racing, Claire's face looming. Daniel had his own ghosts. He'd sit in the library, staring at old photos, wrestling with the years he'd lost to her. Therapy helped, but it was our talks late nights over tea, honest and raw, that mended us most. "I should have protected you," he said once, his voice thick. I shook my head. "We protect each other now." He nodded, and I saw belief in his eyes, fragile but growing. The town embraced the foundation, and with it, us. We hosted a fundraiser, the lawn filled with neighbors, music, and hope. Daniel spoke, his voice steady, about rebuilding trust, about family. I watched from the sidelines, my heart full. A woman approached me. Sarah, the nurse from the facility. She'd moved to town, seeking a fresh start. "I'm trying to make amends," she said, her eyes earnest. I didn't forgive her. Not fully. But I offered her a nod. Keep trying, I said. It was enough for now. Claire's name rarely came up, but her presence lingered in small ways of legal notice. A reporter's call. Daniel ignored them, but I saw him tense each time. One day, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a photo of Claire and Daniel, taken early in their marriage. Her smile bright, his trusting. A note in her handwriting read, "I'm sorry." Daniel stared at it, then handed it to me. "Throw it out," he said, his voice firm. I did, but the act felt heavy, like burying a piece of him. We focused on the future. Daniel's new relationship with Emma, the book club woman, was steadying him. She was kind, quiet, with a laugh that eased his edges. I liked her, not because she was the opposite of Claire, but because she saw Daniel for who he was, not who she wanted him to be. They'd sit on the porch, talking softly, and I'd watch from the kitchen, grateful for his happiness. The estate was thriving. We'd sold a parcel of land, the money funding the foundation and repairs. The house felt alive again, filled with Daniel's music, my cooking, our shared laughter. But I knew we weren't done. Redemption wasn't just about us. It was about facing the past fully. I started writing letters to Claire, not to send, but to understand. Why had she hated me so? What drove her to such cruelty? The words helped, even if they stayed locked in my desk. One evening, Daniel came to me, his face serious. "I want to visit her," he said. My heart sank, but I listened. Not to forgive her, he clarified. To close the door? I understood. He needed to see her, to know she couldn't touch him anymore. I nodded, my throat tight. "I'll be here when you get back." He hugged me, and I felt his strength, the man he was becoming. The visit was short. He returned that night, his eyes clear but tired. "She's broken," he said, sitting across from me. "She begged, said she loved me, but it's over." He paused, then added, "I told her I'm done." I reached for his hand, proud. He'd faced her, not for her sake, but for his own. It was a step toward freedom, toward redemption. The foundation grew, and so did we. We hosted a community day. The estate open to all. Kids running through the garden. Music filling the air. Daniel and Emma danced, their laughter infectious. I watched, my heart light. Margaret joined me, her smile warm. "You've done it, Evelyn," she said. I shook my head. "We did it." She laughed, and we toasted to the future, to family. As summer faded, I felt a shift. The estate was home again. Not just a house, but a haven. Daniel was healing, his guilt easing, his laughter more frequent. I was too. My nightmares rarer. My journal filled with hope. Claire was a memory, her power gone. We'd won, not just in court, but in our hearts. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was this living, loving, moving forward together. Autumn painted the estate in gold and crimson, a fitting backdrop for the life Daniel and I were rebuilding. The George Harper Foundation was thriving, its grants helping families mend what betrayal had broken. Daniel ran it with a passion I hadn't seen in years, his father's spirit alive in him. I'd watch him meet with applicants, his empathy a balm, and feel a quiet pride. We were more than survivors now. We were builders, creating something good from the ashes of Claire's lies. Our days were full mornings in the office, afternoons in the garden, evenings with Emma and friends. Daniel's relationship with her deepened, her steady presence grounding him. I saw George in their quiet moments. The way Daniel smiled at her. The way she trusted him. It wasn't just love. It was redemption. A second chance at what Claire had stolen. I liked Emma's laugh. Her honesty. The way she'd sit with me. Asking about the roses. About George. She fit here. In our home. Our family. The past wasn't gone. Though. Claire's sentence held. But her name surfaced in small ways of legal notice. A reporter's email. Daniel ignored them. His focus on the present. But I saw the flicker in his eyes when her name came up. I kept my letters to her locked away. My questions unanswered. Why had she hated me? Was it greed? Or something deeper? Something broken in her? I'd never know. And I was learning to let that go. Justice was enough. Understanding was a luxury I didn't need. One crisp morning, Daniel found me in the library, holding George's watch. I want to give this to Emma, he said, his voice steady. When I propose. My heart swelled, tears pricking my eyes. He'd love that, I said, handing it to him. He smiled. A real smile. Free of guilt. The proposal came a week later. In the garden. Under the roses. Emma said yes. And the joy in their faces was a light I hadn't seen in years. We celebrated with Margaret. With neighbors. The estate alive with laughter. The foundation hosted its first gala. A night of music and hope. Daniel spoke. His voice strong. About family. About rebuilding. I stood beside him. My heart full. As the crowd applauded. Sarah, the nurse, was there. Volunteering. Her eyes seeking mine. I nodded. A small gesture of peace. She'd made amends. Not to me. But to herself. And that was enough. Redemption wasn't mine to give. It was hers to earn. Winter loomed. But the estate felt warm. Filled with plans Daniel and Emma's wedding. The foundation's next steps. I wrote in my journal. Telling George about our son. About the man he'd become. We're okay. I wrote. We're home. The nightmares were gone now. Replaced by dreams of the future. Claire was a shadow. Fading with each sunrise. One evening, Daniel and I sat on the porch. The air sharp with autumn's bite. I'm sorry I let you down, he said, his voice soft. I shook my head, taking his hand. You didn't. You're here. And that's everything. He smiled, his eyes clear. I love you, Mom. Those words, simple and true, were my victory, my redemption. We'd faced the worst betrayal. Loss. Lies and come through. Not whole, but stronger. The estate stood behind us. Its lights warm against the dusk. It was more than a house. It was us. Our history. Our future. Claire had tried to take it. To erase me. But she'd failed. I'd walked into that courtroom and made her beg. Not for mercy, but for truth. And now, with Daniel beside me, Emma's laughter in the air, the foundation growing, I knew we'd won. Not just against her, but for ourselves. As the stars emerged, I felt George's presence, his pride in us. The pain of the past was there, but it was softer, a scar we'd learned to carry. We were a family again, not perfect, but real. Redemption wasn't a moment. It was this living, loving, forgiving, moving forward. I squeezed Daniel's hand, and he squeezed back. We were home, and that was enough.